Hey, Bills Mafia. We know there's only one topic every day. All Bills, all the time. And now Matt Bovee and Sal Capaccio are going really deep, talking Bills all year long, because it's always game day in Buffalo.
So, Matthew, I just finished my extra point show on WGR.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm over here, and you and I are going to record today, and it's always game day in Buffalo. So this topic was front and center on my mind on the back half of the show, and I went into it a little bit. I'm just going to ask you, because I'm assuming you didn't listen to the show, which is fine.
I did.
Take it. Okay, well, I appreciate that. I will just ask you straight up. Is Eli Manning a first ballot Hall of Famer?
No, but he is a Hall of Famer. He's not a first ballot Hall of Famer.
I agree with that.
But he's a Hall of Famer. I think that just because the notable wins that he has, ending the Patriots' perfect season, 2-time Super Bowl champion, I very much agree that he is a Hall of Famer. I do not think, though, that he was ever to the level of elite that would make him a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Never led the league in anything other than interceptions 3 times, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
He's not in the top 10 in any major statistical passing category, like yards or touchdowns, even completions. He's 11th in a couple of those categories. But I never felt, and I think that it's probably true. People could say, well, one lucky catch, whether it's a lucky catch or not. And I know David Tyree, it is because of the Super Bowls. If Eli Manning has one Super Bowl, I don't even think we're having this discussion. Maybe, but if he doesn't have any, we certainly aren't.
Yeah, for sure. But I do think that the scale and the way that it's judged is completely individual dependent, right? Like you can be, if Josh Allen finishes his career without winning a Super Bowl, he's a Hall of Famer. People will look at it and go, well, he never won a Super Bowl. That doesn't mean he's not a Hall of Famer. He was an elite player. For Eli Manning, he didn't have the elite numbers and the elite play, but on the biggest stage, he won. So I think that would be worthy of being a Hall of Famer, just the way I would make the argument for Josh Allen in 10 years if he retires and doesn't have a Super Bowl.
No doubt. And the reason we're bringing that up is Thursday night is NFL Honors. That's when the 2025 class will be unveiled. I will say, I think it is a weaker class than normal. There's, if you look through the 15 finalists, of course, there's some great names and great players, but there's not a lot that just stand out. Oh my God, you got to get him in. It's actually a pretty good debate amongst that group. And then, of course, MVP, comeback player of the year, and assistant coach of the year, all which have Buffalo Bills ties. You got Allen for MVP, comeback player for Damar Hamlin, and Joe Brady, assistant coach of the year. After Lamar was voted first team All-Pro. There are some different voters, I believe, not all the same for that. Do you think, is it less of a chance that Josh wins? He is actually the betting line favorite, which he became more of a favorite over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look at the different betting lines, he is still a decent favorite to win this. I don't think he's going to, and I think that will be a mistake. I have been pretty adamant. Josh Allen is the MVP of the league. That's not a shot at Lamar Jackson. I think what Lamar Jackson did this year was truly impressive. I just think Josh did almost as much with substantially less. And there's so many different arguments that you can look at. And I hate that it became this like tearing one guy down to prop another guy up, because that's not what it's about. These are 2 of the best players in the NFL, probably 2 of the 3 best players in the entire NFL. They're that good. But I do think Lamar is going to. It just feels like that's the way it has been trending. And I believe the number, it's been like 25 years or something since somebody who was the first team All-Pro didn't win MVP. So the odds, even though he is the betting favorite, seem to be stacked against Josh Allen. The only saving grace that I think is that maybe you could make the argument some of those people did that so they could vote him as MVP to give Lamar some recognition, but then Josh some recognition. I just think that Josh Allen is the most valuable player in the NFL.
So earlier today on that Extra Point show, I had our buddy Mike Catalana on. I'm going to give him credit for kind of saying this, which it's not a new thought, but I love that Mike had this perspective. And I want to ask you about this and get into the Myles Garrett discussion, which is, Mike said, we looked back on last week's press conference and he goes, Sal, I mean, I think everybody would kind of said they exceeded expectations this year. I don't think anybody really thought going into the year, oh my God, they're going to go to the AFC Championship. Look at all the changes they made. Of course, when you get there, it's still disappointing and it hurts and you're there and you should win. And there's a lot of reasons why that didn't happen. But I like his perspective on they still exceeded expectations and they're actually in a way better spot. And it juices you up for next year to think about where they could be because they should be better than they were. Well, they might be that close to land and think that they should go out and land a player like Myles Garrett on the defensive side. Here we have Brandon Beane last week telling all of us in the media room, Matt, hey, guys like Chris Jones don't come around all the time. Teams aren't going to give them away. And then just a few days later,
Yeah.
Myles Garrett requests a trade from the Cleveland Browns. He's a generational talent at a premium position, in a position that you've been searching for years. I mean, how can you not want to aggressively do this? I think you have to be Brandon Beane.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. I feel like they absolutely should be on the phone. They should be making those calls. They should be looking into what it costs. Now, they need to be smart. They need to make sure that they're comfortable giving up the massive haul it would take to get Myles Garrett. I do think, though, he probably has a relatively short list of teams that he would be willing to be traded to. And I know he's under contract, and what leverage does the player have? In this situation, I think a lot. I listened to a couple different Cleveland Browns guests on GR this week talking about, well, he's under contract, like he's going to have to show up. The NFL doesn't work like that quite as much now as it once did. He will be gladly sitting at home, not reporting, and just taking whatever fines come his way if he feels like he deserves to be traded. And he's given that franchise everything you could have asked for and then some. So, yeah, I think the Bills should be on the list. I think there's probably 8 or 10 teams realistically that could make the case to make this move. And what's the Bills are the betting favorite, right? They're a long shot, but everybody's a long shot. The Bills are the betting favorite to land Myles Garrett.
I've heard or read people speculate he has a no trade clause. I have not heard that. I don't believe he does, actually. In fact, Sports Illustrated wrote an article the other day says he does not have a no trade clause. So I'm not sure where that came from, but I don't think that's the case. Now, what you said is interesting because you said there's going to be a short list of teams he'd be willing to go to, but I don't know if he has a choice, Matt, right? If he wants to be traded and the Browns go, we're trading you, then he gets traded.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's true. I know that, but I feel like from an organizational standpoint, you have to do right by people if they have done right by you. The Browns already don't have a sterling reputation. If they just trade him to the Jags, right? Like it's going to make players even less likely to want to come be part of your organization if you can do everything in your power and then they still don't, take care of you. I just think that it would be bad on the organization to just send the guy. If I was the organization, I would try and send him to a contender, but I would try and send him to a contender in the NFC personally, just to try and get him out of get him out of your hair. But if you get an offer you can't refuse from a team that isn't great, then maybe you have to have that conversation. You know what I mean? Like if a team's giving you a top 10 pick and other pieces, it would be just bad business to take a worse pick and send him to a contender. It has to at least be close to make it worth the Browns' while.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew Berry's come out and he still says they're not going to trade him. But I think at this point, everything you said is right. I mean, people see and players watch and pay attention to what's going on. And at some point in time, I think they have to kind of do this, right? Whether that's right around the new league year, which is March 12th, or they wait till after June 1st, where the contract looks a little bit different. Okay, that being said, if Myles Garrett were to be traded to any team, but let's just take the Bills. This is the team we're talking about here, and it's always game day in Buffalo. It's a $13 million cap hit in 2025. Very palatable. He is going to need a new contract at some point. This does not scream to me like, oh my God, you got to give him a new contract right away. It actually feels more like the Stephon Diggs deal where they traded for him. There was a lot of talk of, hey, he's going to need a new contract. They did something the year later. I'm fine with that. To me, that's why, and a big reason why you do this is $13 million. I mean, that's totally worth it. Now you do have Greg Rousseau, who's scheduled to also make $13 million as a defensive end on his 5th-year deal. Maybe that's something that you have to kind of figure out. Obviously, you have Von Miller. I don't think he would be here. He probably won't be anyway. But how do you look at what the compensation would be, how you fit the money, and how aggressive the Bills should want to make it work based on what the, as I said, compensation would be?
Yeah, I think the compensation is very manageable. He'd get a massive contract, and he deserves a massive contract. He has more sacks than any player under 30 has ever had in the history of the NFL. So clearly the production is there. He has been a durable player. He's been available. He's a well-rounded player. This is not like a guy who can just go get after the quarterback and then kills you when they run the ball in all the other areas. He's not that guy. So I feel like that's another reason why the Bills need to be aggressively pursuing him. The only thing that really is a knock against the Bills is I just don't know what assets they could give up that would really entice the Browns unless you really overcompensated. Because for the Bills, the 30th pick, it's a first-round pick, but not really. You know what I mean? So, like, you're going to give them multiple firsts. You're giving them at least your first this year, your first next year, and then probably other things. So you would have to be okay moving on from those assets to go get a guy like this. I would be. The age is a little bit of a concern, just a little bit of a concern. He's younger than Von Miller was when they signed Von Miller, and I don't think that that's a fair apples-to-apples conversation. But it's also why I'm also very intrigued by Maxx Crosby, because Maxx Crosby is a little bit younger, and I also think a little bit cheaper. And that's another name that I think we need to pay attention to.
We do. It's so funny you bring it up. I just talked about this in the Extra Point show. It's like how many people have said exactly what you have. And I get it. I love Maxx Crosby, but he hasn't requested a trade or we know he's available at all. Right. So I get it.
But he also went on TV and radio and every single medium possible the week before the Bills and Chiefs game and talked about how great the Bills are and how great of an organization it is. Like that stuff doesn't happen on accident. Yeah. I have been told from several people that the Bills loved him in the draft process. Like they were a big fan of him as a player. And it all depends on what the Raiders want to do. If the Raiders are trying to get a quarterback and they're sitting with the 6th pick and they don't think they can roll the dice and see if Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders falls to them, they might need to go asset hunting. They might need to go get premium picks to try and be able to move up the draft board. They could do what the Bills tried to, like when the Bills sold off pieces to get the ammunition to go get Josh Allen. So I don't think and I do think it would be a little less expensive. Myles Garrett, I think the price starts at 2 first-round picks. I don't think it would.
That's the requesting price. Do you think they get it?
Yeah, for a team like the Bills, yes. If they're
right, if you're higher up in the draft, maybe not.
That's what I mean. If you've got a pick in the teens, maybe it's a 1 and a 2. That would be, the 17th pick and the late 40s pick. For the Bills, if you're picking 30, I think it's your first this year and it's a first next year and probably something else.
I do want to point out the Bills do have 2 second-round picks this year because of the Stephon Diggs trade.
And this is how I would form. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. This is how I would format it. I think if you're the Bills and you can make a move, if you can give up your 1 this year and your 2 next year, I like being able to spread those out because then this year you would still have 2 second-round picks, and the next year you would still have a first-round pick. So you would still have, valuable pieces that could help your franchise. I would have a hard time though if it was, hey, it's a first this year, it's a second this year, it's a first next year. It's a lot of stuff to give up. He's worth it. If that's the offer, Myles Garrett is worth it, but there's not many other players that I think would move the meter quite as much as he would.
Yeah, they also are projected to have 2 5th-round comp picks, but we all know that how that turned out last year.
I saw 2 4th-round comp picks projected to them.
I believe at Over the Cap where they do theirs, I think it was 5ths, 2 5ths, but either way,
because we're talking about Gabe Davis and Leonard Floyd.
Yeah, they do have 2 4ths actually already. They have 2 4ths actually. One is from Chicago. What trade was that? What trade they get?
Ryan Bates.
Ryan Bates. That was a 4th rounder from. Okay, yep, that's right.
Ryan Bates. They got a 5th round pick for it, and then they traded with the Bears again at the draft.
Yes,
right.
Good call. Yeah. Thank you. Good memory. I like that. All right, I do not want this to take. I am a huge Maxx Crosby fan. I love Maxx Crosby. I really do. I love his story. Go read his background, his story, getting to this point. I think he's a fantastic player. I just want to say on the record, Myles Garrett is a generational player. Maxx Crosby is not. He is an excellent player. Like, I understand the reason why he'd be younger and cheaper is because he's not as good. That's also part of it. And yes, he is younger. He's younger by 1.5 years, by the way. Myles Garrett just turned 29.
Fantasyland, right? Here's your offers. I'm the general manager. You're the Bills. You have 2 options. You can trade 2 1s and a 2 for Myles Garrett, or you can trade a 1 and a 2 for Maxx Crosby. Which one do you do?
I'm doing Myles Garrett.
Okay. I mean, that's a lot. It's a big price to pay. He is worth it. I don't know if I agree, though.
Yeah, it's tough. I totally get any sentiment that says the other way. It's funny. I was thinking about this the other day. You said 2 1s and a 2, right? That's what they gave up for Cornelius Bennett before he played it down in the league. And I remember even my buddy John Murphy on WBEN at night, 1987. It's like too much, gave up too much. You can't give up that much. I mean, and this is a team that was 7-8 the year before, right? And they weren't even contending. And this is a guy that never played in the league. I just think that when you get a chance to have that type of player on this type of team, I think you have to. You can't let a 1st or 2nd round pick difference get in the way of that.
I agree. And that's why I think the Bills, I said this on Twitter yesterday, X, whatever it is. I was at the Sabres game, and during the intermission, I did a Q&A, and somebody asked me just what I think about the offseason and if I think the Bills are going to have kind of a big move. And I do. I think they realize the window that they're in with Josh. Whether it's hard to say it because it's crazy, they're in the second half of Josh Allen's career. Probably. Like, this is we just reached the peak. He's got several more years in his prime, and then it's going to be the back half of his career. It took them 4 years to go from the AFC Championship in 2020 back to the AFC Championship this year. If it takes another 4 years, that's the end of Josh's prime. That's why I think you have to attack this window now, and that's why Myles Garrett's perfect, because you're like, okay, this guy's going to be elite for 3 or 4 more years. Guess what? That's how long Josh Allen is going to be elite. And I think if you can have those types of players on both sides of the ball, you've got a really, really good chance of getting after it. That's been the biggest difference, right? Like, it's not the sexy thing to talk about. It's not the thing that they're talking about on ESPN or they're talking about on the national radio shows. The biggest difference between the Bills and the Chiefs these last couple of years has not been the drop-off from Patrick Mahomes to Josh Allen. It's that team also has Chris Jones. That, to me, has been the biggest difference. Like, I think Josh and Patrick are very close. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs is a different animal, but the Bills do not have a game changer on defense. The Chiefs do. The Chiefs have 3 top 10 players in the NFL. The Bills have 1, maybe top 50 player in the NFL, but he's Josh Allen, and he's that good.
I also want to point out something about his age and production. This is a position, much like quarterback is becoming now with a lot of these guys who are unicorns and playing late in their career, right? Like, just didn't happen when we were younger. It's happening much more now. But for years and years, it's been the case, Matt. Pass rushers play a long time at a very productive rate. Now, you could also get an injury and things could happen, Von Miller. But I want to point out, after the age of 30, this is after the age of 30, Bruce Smith, over 100 sacks, 108. Kevin Green, 97. Chris Dolman, 93. Reggie White, 90. Julius Peppers, 78. Cameron Wake, not too long ago, 72 and a half. Like, he's 29. He's going to be 30 this year. You could have this player, and if you sign him to a deal, which is going to be monstrous, by the way, in the next year or so, you still have him for, as you point out, not only Josh Allen's prime, but I would think even maybe a couple years beyond that.
Yeah, but people are gun shy because of the Von Miller deal, and it's top of mind.
100%.
That is why.
Is that fair?
It's tricky because the first year that they had Von Miller, he looked like Von Miller, and then he got hurt, and he was never the same player after that. Yep. So I don't know if it's fair or unfair, but that's the reality of the situation. That is why people would look at Maxx Crosby and Myles Garrett and go, ooh, well, Maxx Crosby still has a year and a half until he gets to Maxx Crosby or Myles Garrett's age. And that would be something you would be more willing to spend all of these different, picks or whatever it is for. I think Myles Garrett's different, though. I feel like he's a freak. He's a specimen. Like, those are the guys that usually are able to continue to produce in the second half of their career. I also think, too, Myles Garrett in Buffalo makes so much sense because Myles Garrett feels like an NFL historian, much like Von Miller does. He respects the history of the game and the different legends of the game. And I feel like there would be something for him to be playing for the team that Bruce Smith played for. Like, I feel like that would get him excited to be like, okay, I want to be the next great pass rusher in Buffalo, and I want to try and bring the city something that those guys weren't able to ultimately do.
Before I get on to the next guy who is on the trade block that we know.
One other thing. Sorry, real quick.
Yeah.
Myles Garrett has always publicly been very, very complimentary of Josh Allen. And I don't think that that's something that should be overlooked. Like, all of these guys usually talk about, hey, I've got a lot of respect for all the great players in the league. It feels like he has also gone out of his way to praise Josh Allen at times. And I do think that that's another reason why Buffalo would be such an intriguing selling point to him.
A guy you wouldn't have to go up any compensation for. You could sign him because he's a free agent, but he is 33 and turning 34 years old. Khalil Mack. Would that be an idea you'd be interested instead of this with the compensation?
If you strike out, I don't want to say strike out because you don't know what the cost is going to be. If you can't go get a premier guy, I don't hate the idea of a 1 or 2 year contract. It's very similar to what they did with Leonard Floyd a few years ago and just seeing what the player has. Because 2 years ago, Khalil Mack was exceptional. Last year, not so much. So if you get something in the middle, I think you'd probably be pretty happy on a 1 year deal. A lot of it will also depend on what they do with Von Miller and what they do with Greg Rousseau. Because I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Von Miller's gone. I think that they say, hey, this is what we can pay you, and he has to decide if he's willing to take that. I just don't know where else he would get, a big contract. I don't think anybody's running to sign Von Miller, and that's why I could see him at this point in his career. He's already won so much. It's probably just convenient to be like, hey, if my salary cuts in half, I still want to be here. So I don't think it's foregone conclusion that he's gone.
Is there any team you say, oh my God, dear God, do not let Myles Garrett go there? Is it just any team, like any team in your division? Is there any specific teams? Obviously, the Chiefs. You wouldn't love
I
that.
was gonna
That'd be
say
terrible.
the Chiefs,
I mean,
the Ravens, the Bengals,
yeah.
those teams. But it's not going to the Bengals. It's not going to the Ravens. It's not going in the AFC North. They're not trading him in their division.
What about Patriots? How would that hit you?
If you're Myles Garrett, and I understand that he doesn't have a say in this, I don't know if he's.
They have a lot of cap space. They have a lot of picks. They're picking high. They have Mike Vrabel.
Mm-hmm.
They have a quarterback who they really like. I think there was a rumor they were interested in TJ Watt. I don't know how true that was. Yeah.
I mean, they were a week 17, week 18 meaningless game away from having the first overall pick, which would mean they were the worst team in football last year. I really like Drake May. I think the cap space that they have, they got a lot of stuff they got to figure out on that team. Myles Garrett would make them go from being an annoyingly pesky team in the division to a team that might be able to win 9 games. But the Bills are still the class of the division for right now. So it would be annoying, but I would much rather, if I'm the Bills, have him go to the Patriots than the Chiefs or one of those teams that you're contending with at the top of the AFC.
Yeah.
I think you just figure it out. I think you just like, okay, we'll have to deal with him twice a year now. But if I'm Myles Garrett, like I said, he's probably got a list of 8 to 10 teams that he would be willing to be traded to. And I don't know if the Browns would be, I don't know if it would be good for their long-term reputation to just trade him to any team.
Yeah, the Bengals, Ravens, and Steelers have been dealing with him twice a year, and they seem to, be better than the Browns still pretty much on a yearly basis. All right, Cooper Kupp has been informed he's going to be traded by the LA Rams. Mm-hmm. He posted that on his social media account. Is this an idea the Bills should be interested in?
No, it's not. I don't think so. Too much money, and I know that they can figure all that stuff out. He's 31. He's pretty old, relatively speaking. The Bills have made a very they've been very, very adamant about trying to get younger, and that just doesn't check the box,
especially at that position.
So if it didn't cost you any, like if it was a 5th round pick and for some reason he cost half as much, then yeah, maybe that's something they would explore. But I just don't think right now it makes a ton of sense.
I'm looking up. He's actually older than Stephon Diggs.
Yeah. So think about that.
And he would be, obviously, as they traded Stephon last year, he'd literally be older by a year acquiring him than Stephon was when you traded him.
Mm-hmm. He's a great route runner. He's probably a guy who's got several more years in the league to just go and be a good player, but not somebody who I think I would give up a ton for, especially because of the salary that he's got.
Oh, wait, well, what if it was more of a, okay, what about a release and then just sign him to something that works for you? Okay, I guess I'm worrying about the football fit here. I'm wondering about the football fit here, though.
That's different, for sure. Absolutely.
You do have Khalil Shakir.
Yeah, I know. But I like the flexibility that he would give you. He can play all over the place, and he's good. He's reliable. I don't know if he's a separator, though, at this point in his career.
And that's what they need, right?
That's what I mean. They need a separator. So, yeah, he's a little similar to what they have already, but I also think that guy is the most effective guy that they have. So having another one of those is probably not a bad thing. I mean, yeah, if it was not I feel like he's going to be a Chief. I feel like he's going, or the opposite end of the spectrum is he'll be a Titan. Because like every player ends their career in Tennessee at some point. Right. So I think those are like the outcomes. It's going to be like, oh my gosh, the Chiefs got Cooper Kupp. They're going to get the 4-peat, or he ends up on the Titans and, we barely hear from him again.
All right. Super Bowl 59 coming up this week. I just said today on the radio, I'm to the point of now where I knew this would happen at some point. I'm just kind of avoiding a lot of it. I really haven't. I've avoided a lot of it anyway. I guess more so even it's making me angry. And
yeah, that's fair.
I last year said a lot. I hate watched it. Like I hate watched the game because it was in the Niners were like, I don't even know if any Bills fan is rooting for anyone, but you're rooting against Kansas City in most cases, I would think, for Bills fans. Not that the Eagles do it for me. I will say, though, at least there's an element for the Eagles. Nick Sirianni, Jamestown, Southwestern High School, great football family here in Western New York. I can root for that story. But for me, it's just really more than anything against the Chiefs than it would be for the Eagles, obviously.
I mean, I think I said this on the podcast before. I think I'm very distantly related to him. So
You did.
I have to root for the Eagles. I don't really have
You'll
a
have a
choice.
Lombardi in your family if they win.
Yeah, somehow very distantly related, it seems like. So yeah, sure. Go cousin.
Somebody's last name is Sirianni, right? In your family?
Yeah. So my grandmother's side, they were all Siriannis. That's how they pronounced it, Sirianni. And then I went and did a story with his father before the last Super Bowl and his brother. And I told them, hey, we pronounce it Sirianni, not Sirianni. So I apologize if I mispronounce your name. And then we started talking of like, oh yeah, our family from Italy moved over to Niagara Falls and they were in Kane, Pennsylvania. And they're like, well, that's where we're from. We have family in Niagara Falls. So then I called my mom and I was like, hey, does this sound familiar? And she's like, oh yeah, like definitely. Like we have family in that area, a lot of family. And then I called back his father, Fran. And I was like, Fran, like explain this to me again. And we started talking. And then 15 minutes later, I was like, yeah, I think we're distantly related somehow. So I don't know how, like very distantly related. It's not like I think I needed a lot of reason not to root for the Chiefs, but this kind of pushes it over the edge a little bit.
You know, the other thing about this is a year away now, sure, but next year, it just better not happen. The Chiefs can't get to the Super Bowl. The Bills are the only team to ever make 4 in a row. The Chiefs will be trying to match that next year.
Yep.
So yes, the three-peat is one thing if they do it, which sucks to see that. But even if they win or lose, it's on the table next year that they beat the unbreakable 4-year Super Bowl record that most people for many years said no one will ever go to 4 in a row again.
I would be a fool to. I agree with you. Maybe it's the Bills. Maybe the Bills have to be the team to beat them to protect the Bills' record of going to the Super Bowl 4 straight times. It doesn't matter, obviously, the results of the game because the Chiefs could still get back to the 4th straight Super Bowl next year. I would never bet against the Chiefs because I feel like that's foolish, but I think the Eagles are really good. I think the Eagles are really, really good. Like if we were talking about the Bills in this game, I would be very fearful of the matchup just because of what the Eagles are able to do.
Especially running the ball. I mean, I think Saquon legitimately has a great look at MVP in this game.
Like Super Bowl MVP?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, they're going to feed him the ball.
Yes.
He's going to be all over the place. And the one thing that you were really concerned about with the Bills is their ability to get beaten over the top because of the injuries to Taylor Rapp and the inexperience with Cole Bishop and DeMar Hamlin. You know what Jalen Hurts does well? Throws a really pretty go ball. I know he doesn't do a lot of things elite, but that's one of the things he can do. He can move. He can throw a go ball. I don't know who they would have had on A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, but those guys are serious playmakers.
Yeah, Super Bowl 59 on Sunday, and
who do you think's going to win? Who do you think's going to win? I would still bet the Chiefs. It's the Chiefs.
I sit here and I think the Chiefs are
They're inevitable
because
they're inevitable.
That's right. But I agree 100%. I think this game is very much there for the Eagles. I think the way they play defense, the way they take the ball away, like the Bills this year, their lines. I know they're a little banged up right now. The way they run the ball, here's my fear for the Eagles from their side of things. I don't think Jalen Hurts. You can't outduel Patrick Mahomes if you're Jalen Hurts. There's no way they can win that type of game, right? Mm-hmm. So they really have to make sure they run the ball and do the things they've done so well this year. But the Bills weren't able to do that against the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are so good at figuring out how to take away what you do best on either side of the ball.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Chiefs, if I was betting, I would bet on the Chiefs. But at the same time, I think this Eagles team is better than the Eagles team they had 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that team gave them a heck of a game, an unbelievable game. So I'm expecting that type of effort again. And I really trust Saquon. I really trust that caliber of player to have a big game in a big moment. I just think he's kind of built for it.
How are you watching the game? Where are you going to be? You got work?
No, I won't have to work. Growing up, we always had a big Super Bowl party at my neighbor's house. And every year it was one of the best days of the year. But a lot of that was because the Bills were irrelevant. So it's not like you were having the thought of, the Bills should be playing in this game. It's dialed back a little bit over the years. We've also just gotten older. So I'll probably be there for a little while. Then I'll probably at halftime switch and go to some buddy's house and watch the second half with them. It's the whole game, though. I'm sitting there thinking, feel like we should be there.
Oh my God,
yeah. I've as a community.
I've been thinking that all week about New Orleans.
Mm-hmm. It's like you keep seeing the stuff and you're like, I've just been watching all of the videos of the coverage and the press conferences. And I'm like, I feel like we should be in those. I feel like we should be talking about one more week of football here.
Well, we do have the Combine coming up soon in Indianapolis, and then it's going to be free agency starting on March 12th. You have the owners' meetings coming up after that with some league rules and things like that. And we see some stuff coming out now about the technology on first downs and spots. It's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's insane. And that's the one thing, though. It does make you two things here. One, the Bills going this late into the seasons, the AFC Championship, basically pushed. January was done by the time we could even realize it. And we've already gotten to the Senior Bowl already happened. The Combine is in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Free agency is 2 weeks after that. So there's no shortage of things to talk about. I've already found my mind wandering to the schedule at some points. So we
have to have that podcast at some point, but that's probably not till probably March, April. We always have Mike North on, but you and I usually start talking schedule way before that.
Yeah, I do think that it's going to be a relative. The Bills don't have a lot of starters that they need to replace, so I don't think there's going to be a ton of quantity with moves that the Bills make. I think it'll be much more like depth guys. But that's why another reason why I think there's maybe a big fish out there, and that would really get us through the next couple months.
By the way. Speaking of schedule, hey, sign Myles Garrett week 1, Bills at Browns. Bills are playing at the Browns this year. There you go, Mike North. Myles Garrett comes to Buffalo. Bills go to Cleveland week number 1. We do need to mention Micah Hyde has officially retired. His retirement.
That's a good call.
And we want to make sure that we talk about that a little bit. He is still having his charity softball game. I'll still be a part of that as the MC. That is May 4th. May the 4th be with you. It'll be with Micah Hyde in the charity softball game at Salem Field, downtown Buffalo, where the Bisons play. But Micah Hyde has officially announced that he is going to retire from playing football in the NFL.
All-time Bill, fantastic player, unbelievable on and off the field. His impact for what the Bills were able to accomplish. He kind of started the wave. He was there to end the drought and then was a big part of some really, really good teams. All-Pro a couple times, second team All-Pro, but still All-Pro honors, Pro Bowler while he was in Buffalo. 8 years in Buffalo. I had a conversation with him once, and he was like, "Oh, I'm a Bill." He's like, "Obviously, I really appreciate my time in Green Bay, and I have a lot of great memories from those years. But I, will be a Bill and want to be remembered as a Bill, as he becomes an alumni of the NFL." So kudos to him. Just a fantastic guy. Like, you try and take yourself out of it as much as possible, but he is always somebody I really, really enjoyed talking to. Appreciated his time, appreciated the respect he showed us, because you don't always get that. This locker room has been good. We've got some really strong relationships in there, but he was just a classy, awesome guy.
You think he coaches?
No.
I don't either. A lot of people wondering because of, the situation this year, being on the practice squad, he just want to coach and make him a coach. From what you and I both know about Micah, his family, they're living out west. He's such a family guy. I do not think he would want to put in the type of hours and time it would be to coach. His playing career is over. He's done. He might be around the organization in some capacity going forward. Yeah. As some of these alumni have been. Thurman's around, obviously. Steve is around. He works for the team. Jim Kelly's around. They live here. I know that, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Micah Hyde. I mean, Fred Jackson lives in Iowa. He's around the team sometimes.
Yeah, I feel like he might do consulting. We've even seen it with guys like Luke Kuechly, who come back and pop it. Like, he doesn't have any
about recruiting. He's like how these new college NIL GMs. I know he's not the GM, but they're all in the recruiting. Micah Hyde recruiter.
Sure, but I don't know. He could be in charge of the San Diego region or something, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like Micah Hyde has done well enough in his career where the next several years are going to be hanging out in San Diego, living a real good life, watching his kids grow up, and then probably getting on a couple flights a year to Buffalo to come hang out for a week or two. That's what I see Micah Hyde's life as.
One other Bills note, it's been reported, and I can tell you it looks like this is the case. Jason Rebrovich will return to the coaching staff. He was with the Bills from 2013 through 2016 as a D-line coach. He worked under Jim Schwartz. He worked under Rex Ryan. He has since been with the Green Bay Packers, their passing game coordinator. Their pass rush specialist and coordinator and a D-line coach. He'll be an assistant D-line coach. He will replace Matt Edwards, who is no longer on staff. And the reason why this is important to note, he's a Western New Yorker. Jason is a Clarence High School graduate, an athlete, and went on to play at SUNY Cortland. So good for Jason coming back home.
I was going to ask you if you knew him, just because that was before the years that I covered the team. But when he was here, he was the defensive line coach, right? Now he's going to be the assistant defensive line coach.
Yes, he was.
Okay,
and,
cool.
And he's he's a Western New Yorker. When you meet Jason for the first time, you'll know what I mean. Like he's one of us, right?
I know what you mean already. I know what you like. I haven't even met the guy, and I'm immediately thinking like Brian Dable vibes. And I love that. I love that.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, Jason Rebrovich rejoining the staff. Also, Scott Booker reportedly has left the Bills staff. He was their nickel coach this year. He will be joining the New England Patriots staff. That has been the report. I looked. He is no longer on the Bills website, so I'm assuming that is
he works with Vrabel also.
I believe he did in Tennessee.
In Tennessee, so I guess that's kind of a natural. That makes sense, basically.
This is the time of year where a lot of this stuff is happening, obviously, and typically under Sean McDermott and this regime, the Bills don't make big announcements with their lower level coaching staffs until everything's set and they go, here's our coaching staff for the next year. You know, if it's a coordinator, it's different, but we know that that's not going to change, obviously.
Well, I mean, even a couple of years ago when we showed up to the combine, the day of the combine was the Leslie Frazier announcement. Nobody had any idea that was happening. I'm not suggesting something like that is going to happen, but I'm also not anticipating really any news or anything from the team, probably at least for a couple more weeks.
All right. Thanks a lot to Mike Robbie, our producer. Hey, want to remind everybody, head to WGR550.com. You can go to Italy with me. Matt and I, we've both been there. I just want to make sure everybody knows here. They've told me, hey, got to tell everybody about the Italy trip because February 20th is the deadline. We're going to go over there, all the flights, the hotels, the meals, everything. It's just one price, all paid for you, door to door. It's going to be an awesome time going to Italy, July. So make sure you head over to WGR550.com and check it out. Iconic Italy with Sal Capaccio. And then, of course, you can follow Matt and everything they got going at WKBW TV. What do you guys got going on here through the next several weeks besides following the Sabres? I mean, obviously, we'll do that. But I mean, with the Bills and the draft and the combine and everything coming up.
I have I'm going to briefly show you this, but I'm not going to show it to you too quickly. I'm going to go like this. And that's my list of ideas of stories that I want to pursue over the course of the next couple weeks here. But like you said, there's really no downtime. It's these couple weeks. I'll probably take a few days off. Then it's the combine. Then after that, it's the start of free agency. There'll always be something to talk about. We've got a couple really good college basketball teams in the area. The women are very good. St. Bonaventure men are very good. Damon men's basketball is ranked. They're undefeated, I believe. They're Division II. Their coach is one of the nicest people on the planet. So we'll probably go do some stuff there. We'll see if the Sabres make any moves at the deadline. It is incredible that they went on a 4-game win streak and they are still in last place in the Eastern Conference in the Atlantic Division. Like they are in such a massive hole that I don't really see a way that they climb out of it, but I would love to see them make a move. I just am not super hopeful that they will.
And of course you can catch me 10 to 12 on WGR Sports Radio 550. You can follow Matt at Matt_Bove. You can follow me at Sal Sports, and you can always listen, download, subscribe. We welcome in all of our new listeners and watchers all the time at Sal Sports on YouTube. And of course, wherever you pod. We will talk to you next time on It's Always Game Day in Buffalo.